Let me begin this by saying that I have no interest in a Mega Man 11 or any other 8-bit or 16-bit retro revival or whatever. To me, there are no glory days. Mega Man games have always suited me from classic to ZX and everything in between. My ramblings throughout this video are not fueled by nostalgia, but by a desire to see the franchise advance. Sure, we can bash that Scrap the Maverick Hunter project for emulating Call of Duty and whatnot, but when people have an attitude like this, how can we expect Mega Man games to be anything more than a side-scroller equivalent of COD, just churning out the same games over and over? Do you have any idea how many people feel this way about Mega Man? These are some of my ideas for new Mega Man games. The first two are in fact sequels to other games, but I hope you'll find them interesting nonetheless, especially when we get to the later ones where we do venture into some pretty unfamiliar territory. I'll even say right now that, yes, I do think that Mega Man could work as an FPS of all things. I will never rule that out. We're gonna start small but think bigger as we go on. With that, here are some of my ideas for new Mega Man games. Number 1. Mega Man X9. A lot of people will tell you that anything past X4 just isn't worth bothering with. X5 was fine, X6 was horrid, X7 was playable but dreadfully bland, and X8? Please! This game is excellent and easily made up for the bullshit of the two games that came before it. The controls are as smooth as butter and as responsive as they could ever possibly be without you flat out losing control of the character. In fact, this is one of my favorite 3X games, right up there with the fourth and the first. Shame on people who brush this off because it's non-canon, or because it shouldn't exist, as if it's a matter of principle or whatever. This doesn't make it any less of a good product. It's a solid game that updates the classic NX gameplay well. One of my favorite things about it though is the art style that is fleshed out well by the graphics. More than anything, I want a Mega Man game to be relevant to the current day and age, and it should look the part. So, if they were ever to make a new X game, the last thing I could possibly want for it is to be some retro revival with 16-bit graphics. I want to see X's perfectly rounded chassis gleaming in the foreground, with dazzling cities complementing him from the background. They can change his design a bit like they did in X8, as long as he's still instantly recognizable as Mega Man X. And while I can't say I'd want a realistic and gritty X game, that doesn't mean it shouldn't be detailed. I want to see a kick-ass, explosive sci-fi fantasy world that pushes the graphics to the limit in a side-scroller. The thing is, X8 did make some pretty big changes to the gameplay. They may not seem big, but you've got to keep in mind that the traditional Mega Man gameplay is so simple that altering things even a little bit does go a long way to change the overall experience in the long run because you end up approaching everything differently. But I appreciate that as long as it still feels like how you'd expect a Mega Man game to play overall. I don't mind them switching things around or giving it current gen graphics. Like I said, I want a new game, and as the little tweaks in this game show, change is good. Number 2. Mega Man ZX 3DS. Yeah, that's a mouthful. It's too bad so many people were alienated by the overall fine ZX games because we would have gotten to enjoy a third one if only ZX Advent sold a few more copies. For years I've wondered what was going to go down in a third one, but if I had to guess, it would probably end with Master Thomas flooding the world, leading to the Legends games. It's definitely too late to make a ZX game that's anything like the others seen on the out-of-date DS, but if they could still make one 3DS and give it the same treatment they'd give X9, at least as far as the graphics of the 3DS can be pushed, that'd be great. It would be great to see the character and boss designs in a 3D realm with new character models. The ZX games have probably the most over-the-top art style of all, and I'd love to see the world of ZX fleshed out as much as can be. I'd also want it to have a good English dub, and instead of giving the game two soundtracks, one being composed of the more primitive soundboards of the DS, with the other being a series of remastered tracks that sound more like real music, just use the remastered tracks in the actual game, at which point they wouldn't be remastered anyway. Really, these games had some pretty awesome music, but it only really shined when remastered. Point is, if they're gonna make another one of these, it should grow with the times just as the hardware of the 3DS has, to be as polished as possible. But, come on, duh, right? I shouldn't even have to ask for things like this. Just because it's a handheld game doesn't mean it can't be awesome. Maybe the two main protagonists you play as could be Pandora and Prometheus, reborn to be more kick-ass than ever, and given abilities not seen in the other two games. Maybe you could even have the ability to switch between the two on the fly, like in the later X games. Oh, and just do away with the whole overworld thing if it can't be done right. Of course, people might stay away from such a game no matter how polished it is, because, I don't know, I guess it just doesn't suit their narrow-minded taste. Whatever. Now, I know I've mostly been talking about sequels up until now, and no matter how much I fluff it up, some of you are undoubtedly ready to click on that back button because none of these are really new, it's just more entries of the same crap. Well, this is where we finally venture out of our comfort zone. And number 3 on the list is a remake of Mega Man Zero. Just hear me out, guys. I'm not talking about giving it the powered up treatment and calling it a day. I mean completely redo everything from scratch. Now we got a lot of problems to address that need fixing if this is to be done right. So let's just take it one step at a time, okay? I really think you'll be surprised by this. While the Zero games are generally seen as pretty swell games, the first game does not tend to make a very good first impression on newcomers. I think it's safe to say it's the most difficult of the series, but not because it's genuinely challenging, it's more of an endurance run. I do still think it's a good game, and I will never say it's anywhere near as cheap as the tactless parade of constant snafus and gotcha moments that X6 is, but it's so harsh it's downright unnecessary. The thing is, as much as I do love the Mega Man Zero games, they do have a lot of problems, especially the first. But I believe I have the answer. If you'll hear me out, I think the change I have in mind could make all the elements that make the first game suffer so much better. For example, let's look at the concept of the Cyber Elves, which is basically the big gimmick of this series that sets it apart from others and wasn't handled very well at all for a while. In the first game, you'll be lucky if you can even put one of these to good use as effect doesn't wear off at the end of the level. You'll have to spend so much time grinding before you have enough V-crystals to upgrade these babies, it's just not funny. I usually double my vitality, give me a sub-tank, and just rough it from there. The thing is, these Cyber Elves replace the sub-tanks and other upgrades you see in the X games. In those games, acquiring such things is a matter of having a keen eye, being resourceful and quick on your feet and all that, you know? You could say that actually finding the Cyber Elves in this game is faithful to that concept, but I don't remember having to farm oodles and oodles of energy before I could use a heart tank. What's so skillful about that? Now in the later games, they're more lenient about this. Cyber Elves aren't so expensive anymore, and the energy you do farm for them is also worth more than it was last time, so it takes even less time to put the elves to use. Heck, you can usually find a couple of ordinary sub-tanks just lying around like way back when. Yay! I know that making it too easy to use all the Cyber Elves could potentially break the game, but we'll get into how this concept could be reworked for a new game in a bit. But let's address another problem Mega Man Zero had. The ranking system. This is such a bullshit concept. Think of it like the grades you get for taking a test at school. Yeah, it's not much more fun than doing that. In past Mega Man games, you usually get some special new power at the end of a stage as a reward for defeating that stage's boss. Well, it sure would be nice if it was that easy in these games, but nope, can't have that. The ranking system is the ultimate hurdle in your way. Basically, you gain points for clearing the stage, and these points are deducted depending on how lacking your performance was throughout the stage. Heck, you even get penalized for using Cyber Elves. How hard do they want this to be? To get a boss's power, now called an EX skill, you need to beat the stage with an A rank. And in order to do that, you'll need to not only simply clear the stage, but kill lots of enemies, take hardly any damage, avoid using Cyber Elves, and do it all as fast as you possibly can without making any mistakes. This makes it pretty much impossible to get the most out of your experience on the first run. It sounds pretty par for the course on paper. I mean, sure, you'll want to do a good job beating the game, but this game is just so unforgiving that they really are asking for a bit much for something that players should just have. Again, they're a little more lenient in later games, but the only time it's ever really fair is Zero 4, in which the ranking system is pretty much irrelevant. It took them until the end of the series to give us a new, not-so-shitty way to obtain enemy powers. But wait, in Zero 1, you don't get any powers no matter what! You just get to see the bosses use some special secret moves that make the fights more exciting and dynamic and anime-esque or whatever. Thanks for nothing. I get it that they want only the most skilled of players to be worthy of using these legendary techniques, but I really doubt the classic or X games will be nearly as enjoyable if all you ever had the chance to use was your Buster. Usually when I play Zero 2, I get all the powers I can in the first few levels of the game, then use 4 special Cyber Elves that change your ranking to cheese my way through acquiring the others. Sure, you could just breeze through the game without any EX skills at all, but they really do make this game so much more fun. Then there's a story. Here's where we really get into the thick of it. Now, let me just clear things up by saying that I like the plot of Mega Man Zero. The actual story is really cool, it's just the way it's told that sucks. Look, here's all the plot really amounts to, so try to keep up. While Zero sleeps for a century post-X series to purify his body of the evil Maverick virus that originated from his being and seems to be the source of all the world's problems, the world around him changed. X created the utopia for humans and Replies that Dr. Light always envisioned, and he even created new Replies who were immune to the Maverick virus and would never dare raise a hand against humanity. But in the later years, X just disappeared. And having the savior of humanity just vanish is kind of a problem. So they whipped up a copy of him to fill his shoes, imbuing him with the original sense of righteousness and undying devotion to mankind. However, this backfired because the far less experienced, more childish Copy X just wasn't cut out to manage the world's resources. Before long, he had energy crisis on his hands. There simply wasn't enough to go around and sustain all the humans and the old Reploids and the new Reploids in this delicate new society. So, what was Copy X's solution to this problem? Simple. Coldly sacrifice the most expendable chunk of the population under the pretense of them being inherently evil so the rest of the population prospers. He labeled all old generation Reploids as mavericks waiting to happen and set out to preemptively exterminate them in spite of their innocence. Seal, a brilliant human girl who is against this slaughter and knows what the cause of the conflict really is, decides to save the world with science and creates an alternative energy source to solve the crisis. She bends the old generation Reploids together while she completes her research, and the reawakened Zero gives them the edge they need to buy her time to save this crumbling society. This is fucking genius! Okay, so here's two things the story has going for it. On one hand, they've changed things up by essentially making Seal the main protagonist. She's the one ultimately saving the world, and Zero is her muscle, her ward, acting not as an independent party, but as an extension of her, and carrying out her will for her because he believes in her. The very moment he wakes up, she says, "Help me, please," and he just does. It's just really beautiful to see Dr. Wily's greatest creation, intended to destroy the human race, going so far for this human girl and her dreams of a better world. Another cool thing about the story, they've completely subverted the dynamic of the classic and X games. Instead of you fighting evil, corrupted machines to defend humanity from them, you're the source of that evil, fighting the people doing that. And yet, it feels justified. I just can't get over how brilliant this conflict really is the more I think about it. But do they make this clear in the game itself? No, it's more like, you're Zero, and he's the good guy, and here's X, he's a bad guy now, and you gotta go fight him, yay! Because of this, there are so many people who hate this game's story because of how poorly it's conveyed. Now, in the games that follow, you do learn a little bit more about the energy crisis and all that, but they never really shove it in your face like I just did. And really, that first impression is so important. You shouldn't have to go on some wiki to learn all the little facts after you beat the game. They really don't drive this conflict home effectively enough, and because of that, the story that has so much potential just doesn't shine as it should. And I know some of you are just gonna say, well, that's normal, isn't it? Good guy beats bad guy, boom, typical Mega Man story. Yeah, but this isn't a typical classic Mega Man or even X adventure. It takes a series in a bold new direction, full of hardship, tragedy, sacrifice, and loyalty. But, they never really get that across in the game, you know? So, with all of that in mind, here's some steps I think they should take in the hopes of making this game better and new. Step 1, and this is the part that may turn you off, but it's that big change I've been alluding to. To get an idea of just how this change would work, check out this lovely animation by Fgimmer. Also, please be sure to check out their entire animation and sub them if you want to see more of this. So, step 1. Hack and slash. Yep, you heard me right. I think it would be a great breath of fresh air to see this remade as a fully 3D, fast-paced, brutally hard hack-and-slash run-and-gun platformer. I mean, come on, that's pretty much what the 2D games already are. Just try to keep an open mind about this. Try to imagine the core gameplay having the grace of Alice the Madness Returns, the punch of Ratchet and Clank, and a touch of Metal Gear Rising Revengeance. If the controls were smooth and the fighting mechanics were fun, and the platforming was more inspired than it usually is in hack-and-slash games, this could be a really banging game. I understand there's a lot of people out there who can't stand button mashers in which the fighting drags on, but I'm not saying that's what this has to be. Otherwise, I'd just say to make it a Devil May Cry clone and call it a day. I said fast-paced, remember? I'm just saying it would be cool to see Zero Swordplay on a 3D plane, and I think it could work. All they need to do is avoid throwing too much of anything in there, and to balance the fighting elements with the platforming elements, just like in the 2D games. And I really don't think it should be so hard. And here's how everything else about Mega Man Zero could benefit from this change. All those elements that were so very flawed in the original version could be made better this way. So, step 2. Make it easier to nurture Cyber Elves. This is pretty simple. Find Cyber Elves hidden around the stage just like items in treasure boxes, feed them, then equip them anytime you want. But in this case, instead of occasionally dropping an energy pellet here or there, the enemies explode with oodles of sparkly goodies like you'd expect in a hack-and-slash game. Make it fun to scramble for the goodies that enemies spill, and the more enemies you destroy, the sooner you make those Cyber Elves useful. Step 3. Fix a stupid ranking system. Now, I wouldn't have much of a problem with a "you win" screen popping up at the end of some massive brawl or whatever, though that is always a little bit annoying. But this is simple. Make the ranking system unrelated to the bosses and powers you get upon beating them. The rewards of whatever ranking system there is should be based purely on how many E-crystals you get as a bonus for your performance. Let the EX skills be obtained the traditional way, by stealing them from bosses. These new moves could change how you fight and keep it fresh. Add that to all the different weapons Zero uses, the element chips, different forms, different boots and helmets and the like, all of which could be handled with the Wii U gamepad a la Darksiders 2, and you've got a great formula for a 3D Zero game. Step 4. Rewrite the story. This one should be pretty obvious. Just make the conflict more clear and better written so the players actually have a clue about what's going on. I think it's safe to say this should be a console release, and have voice acting and everything. Throw some new scenes in there, change the character dynamics, and just make things more poignant. Design some new bosses and characters. Heck, they could do something really crazy like make the real X the villain, tossing his robot brethren aside because he's so obsessed with protecting humanity. Or better yet, reveal that Zero's purification failed, and this entire game has been one long hallucination because Zero's gone maverick and he's all crazy, tearing up X's utopia and fulfilling the role Wily always intended for him. Or you know, these could just be alternate endings based on your actions or whatever. There's all sorts of things you could do with something like this. You see, people, this is the sort of thing I consider a reimagining of a Mega Man game, not making X look like one of his mindless clone drone thingies. As for the presentation, well, you can probably guess what I want the music to sound like as it's been playing behind my voice for a while now. As for the art style, that's one thing that's always made Mega Man Zero so very striking to me. Earlier I said the ZX art style is one of the most over the top when it comes to Mega Man, but that doesn't necessarily make it the best. Heck, some people hate how those games look because everyone looks like a gaudy action figure, as if they didn't already, or always. But I can't think of anyone who openly hates Mega Man Zero's similar yet more subtle art style. The heroes are childlike, even Zero himself, to emphasize how big and scary the bosses and even this world are. The enemy designs are brilliant. They're detailed and comprised of lots of really cool components all squeezed together, but as much detail as they have, and how bizarre the body proportions tend to be, they're still very clean and compact. They're elaborate, but not so stupidly busy that they become hard to look at like a typical boss from any recent Final Fantasy game. There are no details that feel pointless or unnecessary, except maybe a little bit in Zero 4. The artists who created the unique aesthetic of these designs perfectly walked the fine line between complexity and simplicity, and if anything, I think finding that balance and showing such restraint takes more thought than just piling as many details onto a character as they can possibly throw in there. Like the boss designs featured in Mega Man X7. Seriously, these guys look ridiculous. They have light bulbs and vents all over them. As the saying goes, less is more. Needless to say, I think this wonderful art style should remain intact in a 3D interpretation of these games so they have their identity. They're detailed enough not to look kiddie, but I don't want any redesigns to look too busy and lose that special unique feel these games have. Anyway, I've said pretty much everything I can about this one. So yeah, I know a lot of you die-hard Mega Man fans will be turned off by such an outlandish idea like this, but I'm just trying to keep an open mind here. I mean, you people out there who are sick of Mega Man games just being the same side-scroller over and over and over again, unlike this guy who thinks Zero and ZX are too different, could appreciate my ideas, right? Number 4. A spiritual successor to Mega Man Legends. Oh, you thought I was gonna say Legends 3? Of course I want Legends 3! But we're here to discuss new ideas. Look, I missed this series. You can call me butthurt all you like, but whatever. If there can't be a new entry in the Mega Man Legends series, then the next best thing would be to have a similar, new third-person game that inherits all the best qualities of these games and fixes everything about them that's dated, such as the controls, which looked much better in Legends 3, by the way. The thing is, I can tell you that game was a system seller. Lots of people, including myself, were prepared to buy a 3DS just for the sake of playing that one game. To this day, well, I have yet to get a 3DS. You can probably guess why. I might finally make the plunge for Pokemon X though. Heck, if this was a Wii U title, that would have been an excuse for people to get their hands on a Wii U. Make no mistake, it's not because I'm nostalgic for the Legends series or whatever that I'm saying this. It was just that overwhelming intrigue sparked by the idea of a brand new 3D adventure for Mega Man that felt like a console game despite being on a handheld device. And that's what I want, a Mega Man game with a budget, something big, not a blockbuster, just something with spirit. But I understand that Capcom just doesn't have faith in the selling power of such a game.
I didn't change my weapon back, did I? Nope. Oh shit, I'm doing this with a vacuum.
Truth be told, as much as I do love the Legends games, there are some things about them I could do without. But I'll save that for another time and say what I'd want to keep alive in a new game. What makes people love Legends is its charm, its feel. And while I still think the Zero games have the best art style, I'd still say the art style of these games is probably the most unique among Mega Man games. Really, this is some of the most eye-poppingly fun to look at designs I've ever seen in this franchise. I mean, look at this. These enemies come closer than any of the others, of which there are a lot, to having a humanoid shape. And they're still so bizarre. And then there's this one that's like a kind of cat, dog, raptor thing. And then this one's like a crab, clam, turtle thing. And this one, I don't know, but I like it. This isn't just a mechanical man. This isn't just a mechanical dog. They're so much more creative than that. But of course, there's more to this than just the art style alone. I love how Mega Man feels more like a heavily armored soldier than a spandex-wearing superhero. I love how interconnected everything is, especially in the first game. I love how alive the towns are. I love how bizarre the Reaverbots are with this straw bundle voodoo doll thing they seem to have going on. I love how the wacky Bonds mechs are basically giant robots from the perspective of the diminutive Servbot pilots. I love how the battles with the Bonds constantly escalate and become grander and more epic in scale, and don't just feel like the same battle again and again.
I'm sorry, Troy. After you went to all the trouble to make us such a magnificent robot. What can I say?
Cheer up, Diesel. Don't worry. We'll go back to the ship and come up with a new plan.
Yeah, that's it. That's the spirit. Thanks, you two. Now, I couldn't have asked for a better brother and sister than you. We'll get that blue boy next time for sure.
I don't understand. Even though he got the better of us again, I don't feel the least bit angry. Why is that?
I love the characters. I love Teasel because of how optimistic and forgiving he is, instead of being a typical sore loser sort of villain who yells at everyone else because it's their fault they lost. I love how Tron is such an emotional blender despite seeming so sure of herself. I love how genuine and forward Roll is. I love how despite being pretty much human, these people are somehow able to pop off entire limbs and replace them with prosthetics, armor, weapons, and digging tools without any blood loss or permanent damage to their bodies. Heck, some characters look almost completely mechanical despite not being. But make no mistake, people, no, this Mega Man is not A robot. No one besides Juno is, unless they have bots somewhere in their name. Someplace in Bonbon's chassis, there's probably an actual baby sitting in there. I love how out of this world and larger than life the threats are. They don't just give you something to shoot at and tell you to keep shooting at until it blows up. There's a mystery behind why this strange world is the way it is. I love how colorful and bright everything is, despite the unavoidably dark theme of this being all that remains in the wake of the world after Thomas flooded it. I even love that it's more than a little naughty at times, despite being a seemingly kid-friendly game otherwise. This whole thing is just so quirky and energetic and pure. Of course the gameplay is fine, despite being pretty darn sluggish, but I'd be lying if I said the feel of these games aren't a big part of why I find them enjoyable. And I'd like to see a new game that feels something like that, something weird and bright and intense, and still so very pleasant. While in some technical aspects, these games are horribly dated, there's just something really timeless about the feel of Legends. When I look at pieces like this, I don't think, man, those were the days. I think, yeah, we're going on an adventure! It's such a great feeling, and I want another game that makes me feel that. Who wouldn't? Apparently, there aren't a lot of people who know this, but most of the Mega Man series out there are all just different parts of the same series. There are two canons. One timeline is reserved for Battle Network and Star Force. Everything else is in the classic Mega Man universe. The X series, the Zero series, the ZX series, and the Legends series are all different points in the far-flung future. By the time we reach ZX, a whopping 500 years have passed since the days of Dr. Wowie, and yeah, they crammed about 25 games into this exhaustingly long tale. So how much time passes between ZX and Legends, Another 100 years? 200 what? Not even close. Mega Man Legends takes place 8,000 years in the future. So, if you think about how many battles have been waged in that first 500, just think about what could happen in the days preceding the Legends games. The events of Legends only go back to 3,000 years before Volna's adventure begins, so that leaves us an almost 5,000 year gap to fill with more adventures, with more games. They could show us the world changing, how people have to deal with that and survive. They could change a setting as they see fit, giving us all sorts of new stories in that time frame. Or if they want, they could just create an entirely new adventure that isn't in any way connected to any universe explored in any past series. Not a reboot of the same schlock, just something new, something different like the world of Legends was. People say Legends isn't a real Mega Man game, but not just because the gameplay is different, but because the world itself seems so far removed from what we're familiar with. That's what I want, something with its own feel, its own distinct identity, something unusual yet nonetheless faithful to the Blue Bomber in some way. It doesn't have to be Legends 3, just give us something. As for gameplay, we're going to talk about Ratchet and Clank a little more. For a long time now, I've seen the Ratchet and Clank games as something pretty close to how my ideal 3D Mega Man game would play. And I don't think any one particular stage exemplifies this more effectively than Planet Joba from Going Commando. The platforming is simple yet innovative, the racing vehicles remind me of a ride chaser, the charge boots you acquire in this level feel like a delightfully overpowered dash boot upgrade, and the weapons, heck, just replace the ammo count with an energy meter and you'll see what I'm getting at. These games show just how easy it would be to make a 3D Mega Man game that feels like a Mega Man game, because this already feels so much like one. Curiously, Ratchet Deadlocked feels like my ideal 3D Metal Slug game. So yeah, I'm pretty confident that a crazy new 3D adventure for the Blue Bomber wouldn't be hard to make, you know? Update the gameplay as much as necessary, but give it a feel that's timeless and doesn't pander to a certain demographic for the moment under the bullshit pretense of reaching out to a broader audience. As so many developers who have no qualms with dissolving the unique feel of their franchises like to say so much these days. You can say the other ideas are just rehashes all you want, but I don't think there's much to be argued here. And as for number 5, this is it. I'm going to do the unthinkable. My last idea for a new Mega Man game comes in the form of a first-person shooter. Now look, I will never say that a simple camera angle makes the game inherently bad. A lot of people have this totally bizarre prejudice against not only first-person shooters, but pretty much any game that has you looking out from the character's eyes, because they're just so sick of seeing such games all around them that it doesn't really matter if one is any good or not. And I understand that. I find it grating that they've dominated the industry too. However, I think my recent video should make it pretty clear by now that I don't hate first-person shooters. I hate certain tropes that are propagated by most of them. Things like regenerating health, slow-mo kills that essentially stop the game and make it feel more like some blockbuster movie, copied and pasted enemy settings and plots, worlds comprised entirely of one long corridor. These are things I hate, and they've pretty much defined the FPS genre in this day and age, which is really sad because these tropes limit creativity, with only a measly few special games breaking the norm and doing their own thing. When I make fun of schlock like Call of Duty and call it things like children's online daycare, it's not because I hate the genre as a whole, it's because to me games like that are just dull. They don't draw me in because there's nothing really special or remarkable about them. I don't have any desire to get into them because I don't tell myself that playing video games will somehow magically make me grow up faster. Which, then again, I am kind of an adult already. But you get what I'm saying, right? Basically, you won't be hearing anything like this from me.
On a very personal note for me, it's not another first-person shooter.
Hallelujah! Hallelujah!
Because I'm not at that end of this bullshit spectrum either, blaming everything wrong with the gaming industry on this one type of game, but rather certain franchises that have molded the genre into what it is known for being, for better or worse. To imply that all FPSs should collectively share the blame for the state of the industry because they're all somehow inherently bad for being shooters would not be any more stupid than saying that all side-scrollers are bad because they're side-scrollers, or that all 3D games are terror bad because only side-scrollers can possibly be any good. Yes, it's just as retarded as that. It's a camera angle, people. And yes, we're going to talk about Metroid Prime for a bit. Most of you saw this coming. I mean, come on, this is my favorite game. The reason for that is because it proves that the FPS approach doesn't have to get in the way of a game being faithful to its side-scroller roots. And don't anybody give me shit because Samus is so slow in this game. Guys, I'm pretty sure she's sprinting, not jogging, not walking, not strolling, not tiptoeing through the game. She just takes big steps. Probably because a smooth, steady stride makes it easier to keep her cannon trained on what's ahead of her than if it was constantly bobbing up and down annoyingly fast with every step. Really, why do so many people criticize this game for the way Samus runs? Can't you think of anything else? Anything less nitpicky than that? Look, what makes this feel like a traditional Metroid game to me is the world surrounding you. It's vast and interconnected, just like you'd expect, and there's all sorts of goodies to find everywhere. Other M doesn't feel like an old school Metroid game to me because, while Samus controls similarly to the way she does in Super Metroid, which crafts the illusion of this being a true Metroid game, the world she actually runs around in is a completely different game world because it's built differently. But here, I feel right at home, because while the way you explore this world is a bit different, it's just a matter of perspective. Literally. You're just seeing a typical Metroid game world from Samus's view instead of from behind her or from next to her. The world itself is faithful to the older Metroid games, and that's what I really need to drive home here. The first-person perspective is really just an inconsequential, superfluous cosmetic change that really doesn't alter the gameplay much at all. Now we're going to talk about Ratchet Clank some more, because this will drive my point home more effectively. One day I was hopping around above Planet Smog. While using the levitator, I noticed this one platform suspended much higher than all the others, and knew there had to be a platinum bolt up there. So I tried to get it, and had a pretty hard time doing so. You only have barely enough fuel to make it up there, and you have to be so exact when approaching the platform. I either kept bumping my head on the bottom of it, or winding up too far away from it to get on top before I started descending. I was getting pretty desperate, so despite going through my own death to all first-person shooters phase that you're probably still going through right now, I did the unthinkable and switched to the optional first-person mode that I'd unlocked in a previous run. Now that I could actually see where I was going, it was easy to reach that platinum bolt. I told myself I was only going to disgrace this fine game I love for but a moment, then go back to playing it the way it should be played, and never do this again. But I kept going. And after a few minutes, I was hooked. I got a stunning realization that despite not being marketed at all as first-person shooters, as far as FPSs go, these games are pretty darn perfect. The Ratchet Clank games are so good that all this wind couldn't be contained in one style of play, and the residual runoff just gelled together into a whole new game that was also amazing. I was blown away by how great this game felt. Once I got used to the new button layout, the controls were as smooth as could be, everything was so quick and fluid, aiming was easy, I had a good sense of Ratchet's weight when jumping, the combat felt satisfying, even more exciting and in your face than it did before, and, well, you can probably see where I'm going with this. Like I said earlier, most of the Ratchet & Clank games feel like how I'd imagine a solid 3D Mega Man game being. So with that in mind, just pretend for a moment that you are playing as Mega Man instead of as a Lombax. And seeing how superbly these games handle as first-person shooters only proves to me that, yes, a good first-person Mega Man game is perfectly conceivable. It could happen. It practically already exists in some form or other. I'm not saying I want this to happen. I'd rather go with any of the other ideas I've listed thus far. But with this, I hope I've shed some light on just how truly versatile the Blue Bomber really is, and that no matter what genre he's in, it's perfectly possible to make a good game out of it. Of course I don't want it to be gritty and whatnot like this Maverick Hunter piece of scrap. I don't think it should really be anything like that. But you see, that's what this video is all about, keeping the spirit and identity and feel of Mega Man intact while venturing into new realms with him, trying out new ideas. And I'd like to think that the people behind Maverick Hunter may have in later drafts of it captured lightning in a bottle just like they did with Metroid Prime. So who knows? If it did turn out differently than what we saw, maybe I would love it. The only gaming injustice to be found here is that these cancellations remain mostly unjustified and that none of these ideas will ever be made into actual games. The sad fact is, 4 games have been cancelled, possibly 5, given that Capcom supposedly canned all the games they had been working on the other day when they decided to scale down, and yeah, chances are there was probably a Mega Man game in there somewhere. So many needlessly cancelled Mega Man games. In a row if you leave out that worthless X-Over junk. And yes, say all you want that they had no hand in Rockman Online's cancellation, but I can't help being suspicious that they had some influence in the matter. Come on. 4 games, at least. That's not normal. Something is seriously wrong here. While I spend a lot more time talking about Sonic, and Metroid is my favorite one particular game, I think Mega Man is my favorite video game franchise. And it hurts to see this series neglected year after year after year, while the top men at Capcom continue to have endless ongoing discussions on where to take the franchise, because they're too scared to take the plunge and actually finish anything. Well, you know what? Here's some ideas. You want to cancel 4 games? I just spent the entire video yakking my head off about 5 new games you can make, even an FPS of all things. Just do something, and please, make it good. And those are my ideas for new Mega Man games. Sorry it was a little long and ranty, but I hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. So, got any ideas of your own?